Chapter 22. The Death of Greyson Tolliver. Greyson found himself stunned by this turn of events. He could only stare at Agent Creel as she spoke. I know gleanings are never pleasant or convenient, but even we at the Authority Interface are not immune. Scythes can take whomever they choose, and we have no say in the matter. It's the way of the world. She took a moment to glance at her tablet. Our records show that you were just transferred to our jurisdiction about a month ago, which means you really didn't have much time to develop a rapport with Agent Traxler, so you can't claim your relationship was all that deep. His loss is regrettable, but we'll all get over it, even you. She looked to him for some sort of response, but he was still far from finding one. She took his silence as acquiescence and continued. So it looks like your stunt on the mechanic bridge left 29 deadish, and you're left having to pay the cost of their revivals. Since your transfer here, you've been living off the basic income guarantee. She shook her head in disapproval. You do realize that an actual job will earn you more, and will wipe out the debt much more quickly, don't you? Why don't I schedule you an appointment at our employment center? If you want a job, you'll have one, and one that I'm sure you'll enjoy. We have a 100% employment rate and 93% satisfaction rate, and that includes extreme unsavories like yourself. Finally, he found a voice to speak. I'm not Slade Bridger, he said. It felt like a betrayal of everything to speak those words. Excuse me? I mean, I am Slade Bridger now, but before my name was Greyson Tolliver. She played with her tablet, digging through screens and menus and files. There's no record of a name change here. You need to talk to your supervisor, someone who knows. My supervisors have the same information I do. She looked at him, this time with suspicion. I'm working undercover, he told her. I was working with Agent Traxler. Someone has got to know. There has got to be a record somewhere. And she laughed at him. She actually laughed at him. Oh, please. We have plenty of our own agents. We have no need to go undercover. And even if we did, we wouldn't engage in unsavory to do so, especially one with your history. I made that history up. Now Agent Creel's face became hard, the kind of face she must have used on her toughest cases. Now look here. I will not be made the butt of some unsavory's joke. You're all alike. You think that just because the rest of us choose a life of purpose and service to the world, we're worthy of your ridicule. I'm sure you'll be laughing about this with your cronies when you leave here, and I don't appreciate it. Greyson opened his mouth. He closed his mouth. He opened it again. But try as he might, nothing came out, because there wasn't a single thing he could say that would convince her, and he realized there never would be. There was no record of what he had actually been asked to do, because he was never directly asked to do it. He wasn't actually working for the AI, just as Agent Traxler had told him on that first day. He was a private citizen acting on his own free will, because only a private citizen could he walk the fine line between the Scythedom and the Thunderhead. Which meant now that Agent Traxler had been gleaned, there was no one who knew what he was doing. Greyson's cover was so deep it had swallowed him whole, and not even the Thunderhead could pull him out. So, are we done with this little game? Agent Creel asked. Can we get on with your weekly review? He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Fine, he said, and he began talking about his week, leaving out all the things he would have told Agent Traxler, and he spoke no more of his mission. Greyson Tolliver was dead now. Worse than dead, because as far as the world was concerned, Greyson Tolliver had never existed. Brams! If Rowan had already felt responsible for his father gleaning, now he felt doubly so. This was the wage of temperance. This was the reward for staying his hand and allowing Brams to live. He should have ended the horrid little man as he had with all the others who didn't deserve to be scythes. But he chose to give him a chance. What a fool Rowan was to think like a man like that would rise to the occasion. When he left Xernocrides at the baths that night, Rowan stalked the streets of Fulcrum City with no destination, but an undying urge to move. He wasn't sure whether he was just trying to outrun his anger or catch up with it. Perhaps both. It raced before him, it pursued him, and it wouldn't let him be. The next day, he resolved to go home. His old home. The one he had left nearly 2 years ago to become a scythe's apprentice. Perhaps he thought it would give him some sense of closure. Once he reached his neighborhood, he kept a close eye out for anyone who might be watching. But there was no one monitoring his approach. Nothing but the Thunderhead's ever-alert cameras. Perhaps the Scythedom thought if that he hadn't attended his father's funeral, there was no chance he'd show up here. Or maybe it was just as Xernocrides had said. He was only a second priority now. He approached the front door, but at the last moment he couldn't even bring himself to knock. Never before had he felt like such a coward. He could fearlessly face men and women trained to end life, but facing his family in the wake of his father's gleaning was more than he could bear. He called his mother when his public car was a safe distance away. "Rowan? Rowan? Where have you been? Where are you? We've been so worried." It was everything he'd expected his mother to say. He didn't answer her questions. "I heard about Dad. I'm so sorry." "It was terrible, Rowan. The scythe sat down at our piano. He played. He made us all listen." Rowan grimaced. He knew Bram's gleaning ritual. He couldn't imagine his family having to endure it. "We told him you had been a scythe's apprentice. Even though you hadn't been chosen, we thought it might change his mind. But it didn't." He didn't tell her that it was his fault. He wanted to confess it to her, but he knew it would only confuse her and make her ask more questions he couldn't answer. Or maybe he was just being a coward again. How is everyone handling it? "We're holding up. We have immunity again, so at least it's a little consolation. I'm sorry you weren't here. If you were, Scythe Brams would have granted you immunity too." Rowan felt a surge of anger rise at the thought. He had to deflect it by slamming his fist against the dashboard. "Warning! Violent behavior and or vandalism will result in expulsion from the vehicle," the car said. He ignored it. "Please come home, Rowan. We all miss you terribly." Funny, but they never seemed to miss him during his apprenticeship. In a family as large as his, he was barely missed. But he supposed a gleaning changed things. The people left behind in its wake felt so much more vulnerable and valuable to one another. "I can't come home. And please, don't ask why. It would only make everything worse. But I just want you to know. I want you to know that I love you all, and I'll be in touch when I can." Then he hung up before she could say another word. Tears clouded his vision now, and he smashed his fist against the dashboard again, preferring the pain of that to the pain within. The car immediately decelerated, pulled to the side of the road, and the door opened. "Please, vacate the vehicle. You are being expelled due to violent behavior and or vandalism, and are banned from using all public transit for the next 60 minutes. "Give me a second," he told it. He needed to think. There were 2 paths before him now. Even though he knew that the Scythedom was actively trying to prevent another attack against Citra and Scythe Curie, he had no faith in their ability to do it. His chances might not be any better, but he owed it to Citra to try. On the other hand, he needed to correct his mistake and permanently end Scythe Brams. Something dark in him told him to seek revenge first, and not to wait. But he didn't give in to that darkness. Scythe Brams would still be there after Citra had been saved. "Please, vacate the vehicle." Rowan got out, and the car drove away, leaving him in the middle of nowhere. He spent his penalty hour walking the shoulder and wondering if there was anyone in mid-America as torn apart as he was. Greyson Tolliver locked himself in his apartment, opened the windows to let in the cold, then crawled into his bed beneath heavy covers. It was what he had done when he was younger and the world got the better of him. He could disappear beneath the billowing comforter that protected him from the coldness of the world. It had been many years since he felt the need to retreat into his childhood escape zone, but now he needed to make the rest of the world go away, if only for a few minutes. Whenever he did this in the past, the Thunderhead would let him for maybe 20 minutes, then it would gently speak to him. "Greyson," it would say, "is something bothering you? Do you feel like talking?" He would always say no, but would end up talking anyway, and the Thunderhead would always make him feel better, because it knew him better than anyone. But now that his record had been erased, his old self overwritten by the criminal stylings of Slade Bridger, did the Thunderhead even know him anymore? Or did it, like the rest of the world, believe that he was what his record said about him? Was it possible that the Thunderhead's own memory of him had been overwritten? What a horrible fate if the Thunderhead itself believed he was unrepentant, unsavory, who got his kicks by making people deadish. It was enough to make him wish his own memories could be supplanted. The Thunderhead could turn him into someone else, not just in name, but in spirit. Both Slade Bridger and Greyson Tolliver would be gone forever, without him even remembering who they had been. Would that be so bad? He decided his own fate didn't matter right now. He'd hurl himself off that bridge when it came to it. All that mattered right now was saving the two scythes, and somehow protecting purity. Yet still, there was an overpowering sense of isolation. He was, more than ever, alone in the world. He knew there were cameras in his apartment, the Thunderhead watching without judgment. It observed with profound benevolence, so that it might better take care of each and every citizen in the world. It saw, it heard, it remembered, which meant that it must know things beyond Greyson's falsified record. So he crawled out from under the covers, and to his chilly, empty room he asked, "Are you there? Are you listening? Do you remember who I am? Who I was? Do you remember who I was going to be before you decided I was special?" He didn't even know where the cameras were. The Thunderhead was adamant about being non-intrusive into people's lives that way, but he knew the cameras were there. "Do you still know me, Thunderhead?" But no answer came. No answer could. For the Thunderhead was lawful. Slade Bridger wasn't unsavory. Even if it wanted to, the Thunderhead could not break its silence.
I am not blind to the activities of unsavories. I am merely silent. When it comes to scythes, however, there are blind spots that I must fill with mindful extrapolation. I do not see inside their regional conclaves, but I hear their discussions upon exiting. I cannot witness what they do in private, but I can make educated guesses from their behavior in public. And the entire island of Endura is dark to me. Even so, out of sight is not out of mind. I see their fine deeds, as well as their foul deeds, which seem to be on the rise. And each time I witness a cruel act by a corrupt scythe, I see the clouds somewhere in the world, and bring a lamentation of rain. Because rain is the closest thing I have to tears.